Okay, everybody, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. This class is really concerning the visual inspection portion of the IECC air barrier inspection. And this, we'll go over the blower door, but the blower door test is another aspect of the IECC. We don't do blower doors. There's other professionals that do blower doors. However, we are certified to do the visual inspection, which is another option offered to us in Louisiana. Of course, you know, every state is different, and apparently every parish is different, even though they're not supposed to be, but we're gonna go through this, whether you're here for that extra 2 CEUs or you're here to actually learn something. I mean, this is some good information that every builder should know because it is part of the code and it is a requirement. Okay, let's get started. And I apologize, some of these slides are a little out of order because we tried to put this class together sort of at the last moment, but I'll go ahead and I think that we'll work through it.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we're here. Hold on one second. I'm just trying to.
Okay.
Okay. Is it working? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. We're going to our first slide. Sorry about that. I had a little, Danielle help me out a little bit here on switching to the first slide. The IECC, we filed the 2009 in Louisiana. We filed the 2009, even though we're on the 2015 code, but we followed the 2009 IECC. And this part of the code requires several trades to perform their part of the process of the building. And I will tell you, not all permit offices enforce this compliance test, but it is required by the code. Just because a permit office doesn't require this, it's up to the builder to ensure it is done. And that's to follow the energy compliance code. Now in Baton Rouge, they do require it. In Gonzales, they require it, but I can tell you in some other parishes, the CBO or the permit office doesn't even request it or require it. So possibly your permit office could start requiring this, and then you should know about the compliance with it. Some builders don't even know about it. And so I just wanted to let you know that even though your permit office is not requiring it, you still are required to do this. Okay. Just 1 second, we're going to do a mute on just to cut down on the noise a little, the background noise. We got okay, I think. Mike Bishop is
here.
Oh, we were yes, okay. Sorry about that. And okay, and ask everybody, you know, to mute themselves if they're not muted in order so we can cut down on the background noise. Okay, the next slide is the 2009 IECC code. As you're familiar, this is part of the the residential code book. It's in chapter 11, and this is part of the code that you're required to follow in the residential code. The IECC has its own booklet on different paths to follow. And with the IECC in Louisiana and with the 2009 code, you have two options that the builder could take. It's either a blower door or a visual examination for the air barrier. So you have two options. When they developed this in 2009, they gave you the option. As you go through the code and it goes to 2015 and 2018, you will find that you're required to do both the visual and the blower door. So what Louisiana has done was pretty much keep it at 2009, where the builder has the option to do either or. And I doubt in Louisiana we're ever going to go up to a 2015 or a 2018 IECC code where you're required to do both. At this point, you have the option. A lot of people choose the blower door, which is fine. The blower door is a great way to do the IECC portion of the compliance, or you could do visual. So it's just an option for the builder. It just depends on your situation and how you build. And so we talked about how it follows the 2009 code standards. And see, let me get this thing out of my way just so I can see it better. Let me see if I can do that. Okay, I just had the thing in my way. Now, why this program started was in 2009, the federal government was doing stimulus packages, and this is how I actually got into the program, was the HERO program. For us older folks, the HERO program was a program that was through DNR that allowed energy built homes to get a $3,000 rebate back to the builder if they built towards a certain standard. And money was allowed to train people to become ResNet raters. I was in one of those classes where we tested and became ResNet raters, and we were able to go out and do blower door tests on homes for the HERO program. But in trade-off for the HERO program and the money that was given to the state for those builders, we were required to adopt an energy code. That was the requirement. And so now that's why we have this 2009 energy code, was because of that program participation way back. I think that was about 10 years ago. And through that as well, you'll know that in the last few years here, that your energy, your air conditioner guy was required to do duct leakage test. So in duct leakage test, he's required to make sure that the ducts are performing without leaks, and that the AC guy could either have a third party do his duct leakage test, or he should, most of them train their own personnel to do the duct leakage test in the homes. So you'll see that your AC guy is required to do that duct performance test. And the duct performance test sort of goes along with all these other requirements. The other question was, who can perform these reviews and requirements on the blower door? The blower door is not necessarily required by a third party, although it should be a third party. But the blower door can be by the builder company, say a large tract builder, sometimes hires his own person internally to do these performance tests in-house. Your AC contractor can do them. A builder can actually do them if he wants to train himself to do them. A private third party, which is recommended, of course. If you take the national course and get certified, LSU gives one, I think South Face, I think LSU gives one every 6 months or something like that, where a national company will come in and give a course, and then they are available to people to take. I think it's a day or 2 days, and they could get certified, and then they could do a blower door test. It's not required at this point to have a ResNet or BPI energy rater to do it. However, even though I do recommend that, a lot of people don't participate in that and hire a ResNet or BPI rater. Those raters are able to do performance review. They have the software, and they're trained a little bit better, and they have a higher bar that they have to meet in order to be a rater. Those are usually typically a little bit more expensive. In my experience, I guess what I've seen here, at least in East Baton Rouge, a lot of the guys get their AC contractor to do it, because the AC contractor obviously already has all the equipment because he's doing the duct blaster test. So some of the equipment he already owns. So a lot of the times the AC contractor will do a pro bono for the builder. Sometimes there are some companies around here that are certified through the LSU course, the national course that they give, and they do it around here. I think there's several. We have a couple in the HBA that do it, that are insulation companies, and I believe another company is a third party that will go out and do it. And some of the tract builders around here in the area have in-house people that do it for their own homes that they build. Now, the visual inspection is a little different. It requires a third-party reviewer that's registered with the LSUCC, which is the Louisiana Code Council. And the Louisiana Code Council requires that visual inspector or that code reviewer with the IECC to provide insurance every year and to register with the LSUCC, which is the Code Council, every year. And it requires you to pass, this requires you to pass a test through the ICC. The way I did it was I had to take a test through the ICC. I took the test to become an energy rater or energy reviewer, and then I registered with the Louisiana Code Council, and then that person can be viewed as a third-party reviewer. And you can easily find that through the, let me see if I have it on the next one. If you go, yes, you see this link right here that I put, the hyperlink, or you could Google LSUCCC, which is Louisiana State Uniform Code Construction Code Council, and you just go to search for certificate holders, and you will find all the CBOs, all the energy reviewers or energy inspectors or plans examiners. My certificate is under the specialty certificate. So you just go to certificate holders, specialty certificate, and look for energy inspector. And there are several in every parish. Sometimes they actually work for the parish, but that's how you find third-party code reviewers, whether it be for plumbing or anything. That's how you find any type of third-party certificate holders in their different things. In this particular examination, we're looking for energy inspector or plans examiner. Okay, and we put the link in the chat, so if anybody wants to know where to go to look for third-party inspectors, there's the link in the chat box. So also at the permit office, what's required at the permit office for one of these two options that you have, when you do the blower door testing, whoever you hire for the blower door testing will do a test at the end of construction, and then they will provide a letter to the builder or the permit office. Some permit offices that we deal with will allow you to send the letter directly to the permit office, but some require the builder to upload it. It just depends on your permit office. So the blower door test, typically, if it's say it's if your AC contractor is doing it, he'll just write a letter saying it passes. He probably won't, you know, anything below 5 ACH, I think it's fine. I don't even know. I haven't really viewed some of the letters that they've done, but I think that they just put that the house passed the blower door test. In the visual inspection, which is what we do, it requires 2 site visits, one at open wall stage prior to you putting up the drywall, and then at the attic insulating stage. So there's actually 2 inspections that are done. During the open wall stage, we have a checklist that we have to go by. It's a prescriptive checklist, and you're required to do everything on that prescriptive checklist, meaning every component of that checklist has to be checked off. And then at the end of the attic, which is the second visit, we provide a letter to the builder or the permit office to say everything's in compliance. The difference between these 2 options is the blower door test is a performance test, meaning you don't have to follow a prescriptive checklist. They just come in and do a performance test to see if there's any leakage in the house. The visual inspection is not a performance test, but it's more like a checklist that you go through just to make sure that all the boxes are checked for compliance. Sometimes the checklist is easier for builders, and sometimes the performance test is easier for builders. One is not better than the other, which is why they start you off in the 2009 with the option to do both, and then they step you up in 2015 and 2018 to make you do both, because both are equally important. However, you know, one is not better than the other. At this point, since you have the option to do one or the other, it's up to the builder to decide whether or not he wants to do a performance examination or a visual examination, whichever is easiest in the way he builds. The blower door test consists of the person that's the blower door inspector to come out and then put a screen on the door here with a fan, and that fan will suck the air through the house to test to see if there's any leakage. I don't know if anybody's seen this on their homes or had one done on their home. They can be done on homes that are already built. They can be done on homes that are newly constructed. And this is what they call the performance test. And this is one of the apparatuses they use. They use a manometer, which measures the pressure and it converts it to ACH. You can see a picture of one, a digital one up at the top. I think those are new now. When we did it, we had gauges with the old style gauges. I didn't even have that digital equipment, but back in the day, we had like 3 gauges up on the blower door. And if you have a ResNet rater or a BPI rater, they will also have that connected into their computer system, which has various types of software, whether it's REM rate or energy gauge, and they can give you a complete performance analysis of your house through computerized models and everything. Also, the blower door is able to test if there's any leaks. A ResNet or a rater that has more equipment can go through with a thermal camera while the blower door is on to see if there's any air blowing through, any cracks or leaks in the house. They can do it through a smoke test. There's various ways that they can find where the leaks are while the blower door is being conducted at the same time. And here's just a diagram. This is, I think, from an energy, probably the Department of Energy I got this from, but this just shows you all the areas that testing the air tightness, where air can be sucked out of dryer vents, bathroom vents, window fittings, recessed lights, all those can lights that you see in the house, all of them have to be sealed because those can pull air, kitchen and fan vents. Before a person does actually do the blower door test, they usually seal some of these components, and depending on how your house is, and I think at what stage they do the blower door, these penetrations are, as you can see in the diagram, areas where air sealing is required or closed off. And to talk more about the thermal barrier, they often refer to the air barrier. They call it a thermal barrier, air barrier, an insulation examination. These are all the same types of words for the same thing that we're doing, which is a visual examination. But these diagrams really show you how a thermal barrier is in your house and how this is done. You see the blue lines out of each type of house. On the third house, you can see it has a total enclosed, encapsulated thing. Those are usually when someone puts in the foam insulation in the house and the rafters. I forgot my words there, for instance. But in the attic, some people put a total thermal enclosed barrier by putting foam insulation through the rafters and through the house. So you can see the attic is actually in conditioned space. You will see in the middle one that sometimes you'll have vaulted ceilings or conditioned space there, but you'll have a little knee wall where there's a small little portion of the attic. Knee walls are notorious for areas that people forget to insulate, and it's an area that often or not can provide uninsulated areas that can provide a lot of problems in a home. We don't have basements, so I mean, I'm not going to talk about basements here. But in the first house is typically, that first diagram on the left is typically what we see here in our area of Louisiana. Is the attic is considered unconditioned. A lot of people don't do foam in their attic, and they usually just have blown in cellulose. So your attic is considered not in a thermal barrier, not in a conditioned space. So when you do your res check that you have to turn into your building office, you're looking at the conditioned space, which is everything in the blue dotted area. And when we do a res check, that's what we do. We look at all the areas in the conditioned space, and that's what we're worried about. We're not worried about the garage or the basement or the attic. But when we go do a visual inspection and we're looking around in the house at the open wall stage, we're looking for areas that are hitting the outside or the exterior to the outside space. So if we see an area that's in the unconditioned space, we'll wonder why there's not any insulation in that area. Why is there no bad insulation or blown in cellulose in that area? Because that wall on the other side is going to hit the exterior of the home, which is going to be exterior or uninsulated space. So those are the things that we're looking for, is we're making sure that the home creates a complete thermal barrier. And this just goes to what ACH, what we're testing for on the blower door. And I won't get into details about this, but when you test for a blower door, you're looking for air changes per hour. And if you have less than 3, I believe less than 3 in Louisiana, you're required to introduce outside air. Usually you'll work with your AC guy. If you have a blower door guy, which is why I recommend having a ResNet rater when you do a blower door, because there are some things that are kind of critical with your air conditioning unit, with other components in your house, that somebody with a whole house knowledge and a more detailed knowledge can help you out with, because a lot of these conditions can hurt the house later on. The pros and cons. The pros and cons of a blower door and the visual inspection I put here in your choice on whether or not to do a blower door or a visual inspection is a blower door. It can be cheaper or free depending on your AC contractor. Now, like I had indicated, some builders here have an AC contractor that simply throws the blower door in when he's doing the duct blaster. So for me as a visual inspector, it's hard to compete against free or cheaper when your AC guy is doing it for you. So you need to talk to your AC guy, see if he's qualified, and if he does do it, then he can do it for the builder. Sometimes there are alternative type of third-party guys here that do weatherization I've seen, even though technically I will tell you, anybody that does blower doors should not be doing other types of work for you. They shouldn't be doing AC work or weatherization. Have I seen it? Yes. Should they be doing it? No, but I think that's sort of hard to enforce, but you really should have a third party do it to be independent of doing other types of work on your house. And this can be done at the end of the building process, meaning once everything's complete, you can get it done at the end. It doesn't have to follow a predetermined punch list or checklist for a prescriptive model. So to ensure the subs are doing their job, so it's just a one-stop kind of process at the end. And we talked about this is a performance test rather than prescriptive. The cons could be, if you do hire a ResNet rater or one that is certified, it can be a little bit more expensive, well worth the money in my opinion, but however, it can be more expensive, $400 or $500 sometimes. It's hard to determine where the failure is. In other words, if the house is leaking, you will have to find out where the leaks are and fix those. So if you do fail at the blower door, you will have to figure out a way to weatherize or go in and fix where those leaks are. So if there was something that wasn't done at the open wall stage, or say insulation wasn't put in a certain wall of your house at all, and then the blower door finds that that area is leaking like a sieve, so you'll have to go in and redo that area. So some of those things can be costly if you didn't examine them at the front end at the open wall. So, and also too, the liability could be a little higher because, and this is the case, is if you hire a third-party rater, or not a third-party rater, but maybe a third-party blower door guy who didn't know what he was doing, and he never showed up, and he just wrote the letter. Now, I have seen that happen where a lot of guys have said no guy ever showed up, but they just get a letter. Well, if he never showed up and actually examined the home, the builder could be put at liability, because if something happens to that house and later on a true rater comes in and does a blower door, he will find that there's a lot of problems with that house, and that actual blower door that was done before wasn't either done correctly or wasn't done at all. So that blower door, or the subsequent blower door, if it's done again, has to meet within 10% of that original blower door. So if somebody said it passed and it's not passing now, that could be a liability on the builder. The visual examination, the pros is the visual examination is done at the stage where the contractor can fix it. So if we come in at the open wall and we see that there's absolutely no insulation in the area or no ceiling in the corners, or in the penetrations, we can point that out and they can fix it before they put the drywall up. So when the drywall is open, that's the best time to fix anything. And so that's why you see in the future codes, and this is in the rest of the country that adopts the 2015 or the 2018, you will see that they do both, because actually if you do both, that's the optimal thing, right? Is you go in at the open wall, you do the visual examination, fix it. So by the time you come to the blower door, it should work fine. So you have two examinations, you have the performance and the visual, but both of them should go pretty smoothly because they're working hand in hand. And the other part of the visual examination is there's no liability once the inspection passes. So I'm not saying this would happen, but say hypothetically I were to go into a home and I would see everything was sufficient with the checklist and I walked away and somebody came behind me a day after before they put the drywall up and tore all the insulation out of one of the walls. Well, when I was there and inspected it, it was all fine, it passed. I can't prevent someone from doing something bad once I leave, but once you do this type of visual examination, the builder probably is still liable, of course, to fix it if it's found out, but the builder is not liable that he did a performance test that reflected a certain type of conclusion. So anything with a third-party code, whether it's a plumber code inspector, electrical, or an energy inspector, we can only visually examine what we see at the time and then we walk away. So it's not a performance, it's more of a checklist. So there's a little less liability on the builder in the sense that he has to ensure that the performance test is done by the correct person. Even though you are using a third party, but what I'm saying is that, you know, you're not required to duplicate that test again. Is Carrie? Okay, and then, let's see, I'm sorry, I was distracted for a second. Now, it also needs to be done by a true third party, which adds more credibility on the visual examination. So not just anybody can go do a visual examination. You have to take it from that Louisiana, that LSU CCC code website that we talked about. Only those can qualify to do the third party examination, meaning that they're code inspectors. If you choose somebody from that list, then you're okay. But if you don't choose somebody from that list, then they aren't true third parties. That you have to use somebody that's a certified third party on the LSU or the Louisiana State Uniform Code Council list. There could be times when that third party may not renew, and if they don't renew, then they're, you know, we're required to renew, then they're not qualified to do it. So they have to be on the list every year. They have to update their insurance, and that reflects that they're a true third-party code examination on the energy reviews here for the visual. The cons, and these are the cons that we see a lot, is you must call us at that stage of work. So if you call us after the drywall is up, it's too late. We cannot see the open wall. You are then required to do the blower door. There's no way we could go back, nor would we tell you to tear down the drywall. We just tell most of our builders, once they do the drywall and they put it up, then they just do the blower door. You still have that option to do the blower door if you forget. It's not the end of the world. Blower doors are typically done anyway. So we just tell them to do a blower door. But they must call us at each stage of the work, meaning that once you have an open wall and the insulator goes out there that day, you have to call us that day or several days ahead of time so that we know to be out there, because once they put the drywall up, it's over. You cannot do a visual examination anymore. We won't do it, and we just recommend a blower door at that time. And the other part of the cons is it can be hard to get subs to comply. Sometimes you have insulators that have been doing this for years and they never, they never want to do it correctly, or they refuse to do it correctly, or they miss spots, or they continue to miss spots. But we find over time that these subs get to know what we're looking for. Insulator contractors are sort of not used to people coming back after them. Plumbing contractors, electrical contractors are sort of used to an inspector coming by and looking at their work. Insulation companies are just now starting to get used to actually someone's coming back to look at their work. They're not used to that. But once they get used to knowing that someone's checking their work, I think in the past, they could have taken advantage of some builders where they just go out there, they do it, and the builder doesn't see it, and the drywall goes up real quick. So what they didn't do, the builder would never know. There's never some back check on it. But when it comes to energy and reviewing for energy savings on a home, that examination, that open wall or that blower door is now the check that we haven't had for years on insulators or sealing companies when they come in and seal or weatherize or do insulation. Now we have to make sure that everything in a home is insulated right, because insulation, a lot of people don't know, insulation is just as important as your wiring in your home, as your plumbing in your home. It's a very important process in the home building process to make sure it's done correctly. So that's why we have these energy reviews in the homes. And, you know, depending on the builder, sometimes prescriptive can be harder. In the end, the builder doesn't have to follow the checklist. He can just do a performance test. And as long as he passes on the performance, which is the blower door, that can be sufficient. And just to let everybody know, as far as on the energy score, we're in climate zone 2, as you can see on the bottom there of that map. That is the map with the for the residential code that we all follow, and the energy code, the IECC. We're in a warm, humid climate area here where that white line is. And so we're in zone 2. And that's the table that we always use in the code book and in the IECC code book as well, where we're always referring to climate zone 2. And everybody wants to know what that visual punch list is. When we go out there and we're looking for different things that they have to comply with that are called the prescriptive punch list, this is it right here. This is the main part. The ceiling of the attic, the walls, the rim joists, the floors. I mean, some things don't apply here, crawl spaces and things like that, but the plumbing and wiring, the recessed can lighting, the garage separation is important. You know, when I showed you that thermal barrier, the garage is outside the thermal barrier. So we want to make sure insulation is right there by the garage separation. The electrical and foam boxes, common walls if that's required, fireplaces. This is the checklist that we'll be looking for at the open wall and at the end when we look at the attic at the very end. So we'll just go by this checklist. And further along in this PowerPoint slide, I have pictures of what we see when we go out to the home. So when I say we have plenty of pictures, we do have plenty of pictures to show you what each of these components are and what we're looking for, the good and the bad. So yes, we talked about 2 inspections. For the visual inspection, which is your option in there. This is not the blower door. On the visual inspection, we require 2 inspections. One at the open wall. We ask that the builder call us, or when they feel it's 80% complete. Sometimes we'll go out there a little too early and they only have a quarter of the home insulated. That won't qualify. We'll have to wait until they get at least 80% of that home complete before we can do our insulation inspection or our air barrier inspection. Like I said, most insulators will get used to the inspection process. They'll make sure, and we'll go out with the insulators in the beginning if they're not used to it, to train them, to show them what we're looking for. And they usually get it. Usually the problem that we have with insulation companies, it's not so much that the insulation company is doing it wrong. It's just, you know, sometimes with these businesses, subs will, or workers will come and go. So they'll train a new set of guys to do it. And maybe those guys will last only a year and they'll get new guys in. So we could have an insulation company that's done wonderful work for a year and we don't have to do anything. And one day we come into a home and it's not sealed all the way, or some of the insulation's falling out or something like that. And we can automatically tell that maybe there's a new crew online. So they've got a new guys online. So it does take these guys a little bit that are new to get used to what the right process is. So we're always on the lookout for new guys that come in, and we can usually tell. But most of the time, once the insulators know what we're needing, they do it correctly. After the first or second time, we ask them to come back and fix something. And on the attic insulation, generally, we don't have too much trouble with the attic insulation, but we have to come in to check to make sure the attic is insulated correctly. And the other part that's sort of important, which is the biggest part that we have trouble with, is the attic door. attic door or the drop-down door that you have to go to the attic, or even the walk-in door, but we mostly have drop-down doors to attics. Those have to be sealed. Now, Louisiana did an amendment to the attic door insulation where you only have to have an R4. In the other code, if we were to follow the regular code books or the 2015, the insulation has to be continuous, meaning it has to meet the R30 or whatever to go across the attic door threshold. But in this case, in Louisiana, they did an amendment where you could just put an R4, which means you could just put a little foam sheet or just the bat on it, and it has to be gasketed and sealed. So we just look for that on the attic door. And a lot of times attic door is what usually is our big problem at the attic insulation stage, is there's no insulation on the attic door and it's not gasketed and sealed. So I would say 90% of the time, that's our non-compliance point that we get on the attic insulation. And we talked about the framing. The framing is an important part. Now, I'm not saying the framers here do this, but a lot of the times where we have non-compliance in the framing and with some of the areas where there's a lot of openness or penetrations that aren't sealed, is usually the way they do the framing on the interior, where they have the exterior wall meeting an interior wall, and they do the 3-stud thing like on the lower bottom right. Those type of things, when an interior wall is meeting the exterior wall, those corners right there, those things are hard to seal. And then you can see behind that 3 studs, there's 3 studs right there. It's hard to get insulation behind there. So all they do is caulk and foam, and it's just very difficult to seal that. If you had a good framer, he would maybe be able to do what they call the ladder T-framing, where you see right below where the word framing is, you can see where they have the blue arrows, where they do the interior wall and they connect it to the exterior wall. You can see there's no tiny gap. They actually have an area where bat or foam, or whether it be blown cellulose, can fit behind those studs right there. And there is no problem with holes or anything like that or to be sealed, because you have a wonderful area there. This all can be done with your framing guy. It makes it a little easier. I have another picture of something similar to that, and you can see where there's some diagrams up at the top. But sometimes the framing in itself causes problems the way they frame it, because most of the interior walls where we see meet the exterior walls usually come to that corner, like down on the lower right hand side here in my picture where I have the X. Usually we get that, and it's very hard to put anything behind that 1 stud you see there. The attic door, we just talked about this. The attic door needs to meet an R4 in Louisiana. There are a couple ways you could do that. I mean, an easy way is just to get an attic tent. They sell them at Home Depot and different places. I don't know how much they are. They could be like $50 or something like that. And if you put that on your attic door, if we see that there, that's completely sufficient. That's fine. It's easy just to pop that on there. And then that will provide a thermal barrier between your attic door, because that's where obviously you can see a lot of leakage coming in from the attic down into your hallway from the attic, is from that door. That's a huge threshold barrier that you can have a lot of leakage. Some of the other things, you could put like the rigid foam board, which is sort of in the middle there. I took a picture of it. The other picture up top is where they just put bat behind the stairs. And then also too, you're required to seal it and gasket it, like on the bottom 2 pictures there. So you're required to have a sealed gasketed area with the R4 going across the attic door. Insulated headers are another part. Now, I will tell you, I have not seen too many of this in homes. This is sort of what we as visual inspectors leave it up to our discretion. Wood is not an insulating barrier. Wood is not considered an insulating barrier. So headers above doors are required in the code book to have insulation in between. You will see some people can make boxes out of their headers and put bat in the middle. Some people can make headers with the insulation in it. I've seen like the middle one where wood or lumber companies have made insulated headers pre-made that you could buy and they're already integrated with insulation. That rigid foam board or that bat keeps that area of wood in between insulated, because wood is not an insulate. Everybody thinks, well, it's just wood, but wood is not an insulation barrier at all. So that's why they want that. Now, I rarely see that, and you know, I've let that go, but that is a requirement. As we get stricter, you know, to me, it's more or less baby steps. As long as they've done 99% of the things in the home, I may or may not, you know, allow the insulated headers, but it's not something I really look for or fail based on not having insulated headers, but it is a part of the code. So I just wanted to let everybody know about that. And we talked about the energy quarters and the framing. When you have the corners that are like on the bottom right, it's very difficult. Sometimes you get gaps. The wood has areas that aren't straight. So those are hard. They call them California corners. They call them energy corners, but a framer can make a corner where there's a recessed area where they can actually put insulation in it. And you don't have that, that corner stud area right there where you have to seal it. And I'll show you some other pictures where those corners and those interior things, those, every time you have a corner that you don't have any insulation behind it, or you can't put insulation behind it, you've got to seal it with caulk. And those are very difficult to seal because a lot of these ceilings are 12 foot high. So the guy's got to get on a ladder and take the caulk all the way up to the top. We've seen it where they've caulked everywhere, just to their height, and everything else above it's not caulked. So we have to call them back out there, and they have to actually get a ladder and come up and seal it all the way up to the top of the stud up there at the ceiling of the house. But energy corners are something that hopefully framers in the future will get to know better. Framing is one of the categories, I would say, is the last category on my list as a visual inspector that we really need to get into compliance. Because if the framers did things or framed better, it's not more difficult to do. It doesn't cost more, and it doesn't hurt with the integrity of the home to frame it this way. It's just the framers are not used to doing it this way. Now we're going to start getting into some pictures. And some of these pictures will show you what we're looking for when we come out and do the visual inspection, because I think this is the best way to show you or make you understand what we're looking for. These are called upper penetration areas that we look for when we come, and this is in the open wall stage. So a lot of these pictures that we have are going to be open wall pictures that we're going to show you and what we're looking for. In the upper penetrations of the open wall stage, we're looking for when PEX or electrical wire, when they go up there and drill wire to run it through the top of the ceiling, you see where they have to have foam there. We'll look to see that all those holes have foam in it. If those holes don't have foam in it, or if they've been not foamed at all or caulked, then we'll say that those areas, they need to come back out and finish those. So we'll walk around the house and look to make sure that any hole, and sometimes you'll see that the electrical contractor wanted to put a wire through a hole, he'll drill a hole and then he'll abandon it and go put another hole. Well, that abandoned hole needs to be foamed up, even though a wire's not going through it, because that's a hole that air can come through. So we're looking for an air barrier, remember? And so we're making sure all those holes up at the top of the area there, the ceiling where they run it through, whether it be PEX or anything. Now, I will tell you there's a lot of holes. They're not too many where they have to run it horizontally into the wall. Those are sometimes missed. So we'll go look for not only the upper penetrations, but the horizontal penetrations that'll come through our house. And we'll look for, basically, if it's got a hole, it's got to be caulked or foam. So we can't have any of these holes that don't have anything that go to an exterior. And remember those upper penetrations, why do they have to be caulked foam? Because they're going into the attic. And the attic is considered an exterior part of the home. So even though it's inside the home, it's not within the thermal barrier. So they have to be caulked and sealed. And if they go out horizontally to an exterior wall, it's going out to outside the thermal barrier. So it has to be caulked and sealed. Now, I will tell you, if I know a home, which is rare, but if I know a home's going to be totally foamed in and the attic and the rafters are going to be sealed, then those upper penetrations don't have to be caulked because it's not going into outside a thermal barrier. If I know the house is going to be totally enclosed, I'm not looking for upper penetrations to be sealed because it's in a total thermal barrier. So that's the key. Where the wires are going to, if the wires are being traced to go outside, they have to be sealed or caulked. Another thing that we look for at the open wall stage is there's decking. Usually it's OSB or plywood decking up at the top to hold the mechanicals, such as your air handler and stuff up in the attic. When you have that decking and you have the air handler and everything up there, they have to put batt insulation underneath the decking. So when I'm walking through the house and I'm looking up, I'm looking for all the decking area. If I can actually see the decking, it's not in compliance because there should be batt under there. Because when the attic insulators come in at the end and they blow insulation through the attic, they can't get underneath that decking. The only time they can get underneath that decking is when it's in an open wall without the drywall up of your ceiling. So they have to put batt insulation up under the decking so you have that insulation under the decking, so you have a thermal barrier underneath that decking. So that's usually where the air handlers are at, or your hot water heater that may be up in the attic. So any of those areas, those platforms that hold the decking for any mechanical equipment up there or your plumbing, I'm going to be looking for batt insulation underneath it. If there's no batt insulation underneath it, then I'm going to be calling the insulation guy to come out and put batt insulation, because I know that they're not going to be able to insulate that once they put the ceiling up, the drywall ceiling up. They won't be able to get underneath there with the blown in attic cellulose at the end. We talked about windows and doors. Windows and doors, I'll go throughout all the windows and the doors to make sure that it's caulked and sealed. And I think that's something that most people know, is that the windows and doors have to be sealed. So I'll go around to make sure they did the whole perimeter of the door and the whole perimeter of the window to make sure that they put sufficient caulk around the whole perimeter of that. The main thing is that we don't want to see gaps. We don't, if there's a hole and it's going to an exterior area, we want to make sure any of those are sealed. I mean, every house is a little different in how they're built. But in general, we're looking for gaps and seals. If a raider were to come back with a thermal camera, he can easily see where there's air leakage or gaps or seals or gaps in the house or moisture coming in through the house. And usually they come through areas that are unsealed. If your house is sealed, that you're not going to have properly, you're not going to see these later on. These things can cause problems from homeowners down the road, and even the smallest penetration that hasn't been sealed can make a huge impact on a home when it comes to comfortableness of the home and the AC and moisture problems in the end. So we're just always looking for gaps anywhere in the home. Of course, cavity inspection, you can have a 2x6 wall or a 2x4 wall. The 2x6 wall is going to give you a thicker, more insulating capability. This is sort of just a couple pictures of the different types of insulation we see. In the upper left, there's foam. You can have open or closed cell foam, and those houses are, we don't get those too often, but they happen, and foam is good, and that's in the upper left-hand corner. The middle one with the white, those are just cellulose homes where they blow into the cavity walls. Cellulose, they also call it spider. I think on the bottom, they call it spider or just blown in cellulose. That's usually what we call it. In the upper right-hand corner is rock wool. I still see some homes that do rock wool. That was a little bit more popular 5 years ago. People still use it now. Rock wool is another blown in system that's put in between the cavities. The one on the white you see on the right hand side with the holes in it, that's called bibs. That's blown in. So what they do is they put this netting across the cavity of the 2x4 or 2x6, and then they punch a hole in it and they put their tube in it and they blow in the cellulose, and it's called bibs. Blown in bats or whatever they call, blown in bats, I guess, bibs. And that's in the middle right hand corner. We see the white, and we call that bib insulation. And of course, on the bottom where the pink is, that is what we call batt insulation, your typical batt insulation. And that's in about 50% of the homes that we see. So we usually see blown in cellulose, which is the white, just blown in. We see the bats is the next item that we see. And then we see rock wool bibs, and then rarely we see foam. But if we see foam, we probably ask a couple more questions because we're probably wanting to know if it's going to go in the attic or other places. But foam is all, you know, you can also do a hybrid. You could do the attic and foam, and then, you know, bat in the wall. So there are hybrid homes as well. Oh, blown in blankets. I apologize. Maybe blown in blankets. Sorry. Sorry, blown in blankets. Thank you, Bobby. I forget. Let's see, good attic insulation. This is a picture of good attic insulation. You could see the joists are covered. It's got a nice fluffy fill throughout it. So this is, you know, good attic insulation. Most of the times we don't have too many problems. I mean, we might have every now and then, maybe if they don't put enough attic insulation there, you'll see joists, you know, being lower than the joist and the cavity not be completely filled. I have not seen that. Most our attic guys do a pretty good job. So there's a picture of good attic insulation. Here's also another picture of good attic insulation. Sorry for the misspelling there, but no joists are shown. And here's another. I think this one's pink, but I don't know if that's a off-cast color, but most of the time I see white. Now I just put an item in here. In other homes across the rest of the country, in the 2015 and the 2018, they're required to put a little ruler in there taped to the rafters or something like that, that shows what type of insulation in there, and a ruler to show how high the fill is. So there's a little higher requirement for attic insulation as far as to show and to dictate how the fill level is in the attic. That's not required in the 2009, but I will see some attic guys sometimes put those little rulers in there because usually they're going by like the 2015 code, which does require that. And that's always a good practice. Here's another good attic. And also one of the things we see is that the ductwork is all strapped properly. You know, strapping of ductwork, it's usually not our compliance mode to look at, but it's always optimal to see the ductwork strapped properly and laying properly in the attic. We don't want to see twisty ductwork all around and crushed ductwork. This all should be strapped nicely in the attic. And here we have R4 ductwork. That's a minimum requirement. Of course, R8 is always the optimal in the ductwork, but you know, that's not required in Louisiana a requirement at this point. Here's another good attic insulation, nice fluffy fill. This is what I typically see, the white fill in the attic, and that's all. It looks very nice. Now, bathtubs is one thing that we really kind of take a second look at, and we bend down and really look behind. Bathtubs, if they're placed against an exterior wall, we go behind the bathtub with our hand and we look behind the bathtub to make sure there's insulation behind that tub or that shower stall, because that is a typical place that insulators will forget to do, because they usually put the tub in and then they just fill in the insulation and then they just forget to do anything behind the tub. So we go back there and we make sure that they have, I don't know why my screen went a little darker, but we'll make sure that the, oh, hold on one second. Let me just do a plug in real quick just to make sure that I'm keeping my laptop plugged in. Hold on one second. Let me do a little housekeeping here. Okay, thank you for allowing me to do that. I just wanted to plug my laptop in just to make sure I had good power there. So you can see right here where we look behind the bathtub. Oh, yeah, I got it. I think it's coming now. Sorry. I think it takes a while to come back. Okay, and here's another bathtub view where we get down and take a picture. Now, just to let you know too, on all these inspections that we do take a timestamp picture of when we were there and pictures, because we could come back and they could audit us. Whether it's the Louisiana Code Council could come back and say, did you visit this house? Or even the CBO for that permit office could say, prove to me that you visited that house. It doesn't say that we are required to take pictures, but for my insurance policy and for my liability, I always take pictures. Me or anybody in the staff here will take pictures to make sure that we have evidence that we visually view this and we were there on that day. So we always keep proof, and I'll archive that in my digital or portfolio so I can always pull up that house, what day we were there. We never do, anybody that does drive-by inspections is not any code guy who could just pull up to a house and say it's good. That's, if they don't walk into your house and walk around, then they haven't done an inspection. So when we see a bathtub, we take a picture as best we can with the camera underneath it to show that we looked at it, and at that point in time there was insulation behind the tub or the shower stall. And here's another picture of a tub against an exterior wall of a house. And you could see right there, there's a non-compliant thing because I see a wire going through that stud that's going to the outside and it hasn't been caulked. So even though we have a good bathtub, we have a non-compliant penetration there. This is not the best bat done here. And of course, we can talk about that later where the bat's not facing the right side. But anyways, that bat is there. And then shower stall, we'll look behind shower stalls. Those are a little harder sometimes and I can't see a gap. I have to sometimes put my hand back there just to feel it. And just to make sure that there's something there. If there's nothing there, it's obvious, you won't feel nothing. But if I get back there and my hand feels something, I'm pretty confident that there's insulation behind there. Here's a bad open wall. You can see where sort of like a stairwell right here went up and then they stopped insulating. And there's this whole area of cavities without insulation. So that's non-compliant. We take a picture of it. We'll send it to the builder and we'll say, missing an area here. And the builder will call the insulation company to come back out and fill that area. And then we'll either require a picture or another inspection for us to go out to ensure that that area has been filled in as required. Here's another one where the bad insulation just completely fallen out. Sometimes we can help with that by just putting some stuff back in, but if we see, you know, bats not put in there right, then they weren't cut correctly or anything. Then we have bats here. We can go into bat insulation and what we see with the paper face bats versus not paper face bats. I figure I'd just show you the technique here. And we'll talk more in another slide about bats. And here's another open wall with bats in it. And doors, yeah, doors and windows have to be sealed. And here's another one with bat insulation. And here's one with blown in blankets, as Bobby said, and the bat insulation. Bad decking. Here's one where the decking, where we walk underneath and I see decking there and I see no bats up there. So that's non-compliant. So we'll call the builder and say none of the decking underneath the decking has bats and it's not insulated. We have to see that decking underneath. I need to see bats right there where you see that OSB over there by that can light. I need to see insulation all where I see that OSB and that decking. I need to see insulation all there. Yes, this is bad. It's the insulation too, as we can see. And where do we have PEX piping? You know, I see the PEX going into the attic. Those are supposed to be sealed. And this is cathedral ceiling. So you have cathedral ceilings and knee walls. Those knee walls have to all be insulated. We have recessed lights. They need to be, of course, you know, your recessed lights have to be sealed. The housing for the light has to be a sealed light. I don't think they sell can lights anymore that have holes in it. Years ago, can lights used to have holes where you can look up through the can light, you could see the attic, or you could, you know, they have holes in it, but now they're all supposed to be sealed. So I don't even think they sell these recessed lights that aren't sealed that you put in. Here's decky that's done with the recessed lights. You see all the bat in there. And you can see where the PEX pipe, I put an arrow where I look for the sealing of the caulking and foaming of that PEX pipe as it's going up into the attic. And this is where I want to show like these corners. You see how those corners meet and there's a gap where there's supposed to be foam or caulk in those gaps. So that hasn't been sealed right there. So we'll call, or we'll send a picture to the builder and say gaps haven't been sealed, and they'll send somebody out there, you know, to go ahead and seal those up. And we talked about the T connections and stuff, the interior wall connections. You could see where their interior wall meant an exterior wall inside the house. And you see those gaps where that arrow's pointing, that's a big gap right there. We need to get those sealed. You can see the PEX pipe has been sealed down there, that red PEX pipe, but we have a lot of gaps still in the house from here and there. And sometimes the lumber that they get is just not straight wood. And when they put it together, they have a huge gap in it, but all those need to be sealed. Here's a nice corner that's sealed and flush with the lumber, which is good. You know, what's bad sealing too is they come in and they put this foam in there and it's all bubbly and stuff. And you know what happens with foam that's all big and bubbly and not recessed into the corner? The drywall guys, when they come in, they just knock it off. So a good corner sealing is one that's flush with it, that it's not in the way of the drywall guy. And you could see here, he's performed a good air sealing right there on the corner. Open wall and corner. You could see here, there's a blown in cellulose and they've sealed the corners nicely. So this is a nice insulation job here. Knee walls, small walls. I think here he has a little bit of both blown in and bats. We talked about what's wrong with this picture, and I didn't even know Bobby was going to be on this call, but I wanted to go into this. A lot of the homes that we see, and maybe Bobby could interject in this, but a lot of the homes that we see, the bats, the paper is facing on the outside. So we don't want the paper facing on the outside, because paper facing on the outside in the southern climate can particularly cause mold. The paper should be facing towards the exterior, and you should have just bats facing your drywall, the bats. And let's see, what do I have? And we talked about, you know, houses, when they're air conditioned on the inside and they condensate, you're going to have moisture on the outside of that drywall when you're air conditioning your home, and that's going to be against that bat area right there. So if you have paper face bats, you have the potential for mold and problems because it's causing an air barrier between that. So you should have, is Bobby unmuted? Or Bobby, if you're listening, can you interject about the issue where you always see the paper face bats on the interior of the home?
Yeah, the bat should always face the exterior. We always want our vapor barrier to be on the warm side. It kind of goes back to that picture you just showed with all the plastic cups. One of the laws of physics there that really apply to us in the Gulf Coast region is cold usually means wet, warm usually means dry. So we always want the vapor barrier, any type of vapor barrier, to be on the warm side of the wall cavity, which for us in the South, 9 months out of the year is the exterior of the building, because we're only about 10% of the United States. And if you read the bold print on a lot of the insulation bags, it will tell you that the craft paper should be toward the interior. And that is correct for 90% of the United States. But we're in that 10% down here where we're backwards of everybody else, where they're mainly worried about heating their houses. We're mainly worried about cooling our houses. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's an excellent point. That craft back paper should always be to the exterior of the building. And that is in the fine print. If you read the fine print on most all of Guardian, Owens Corning, all of those manufacturers now are putting in the fine print the little small writing that if you're in the Gulf Coast area, they actually recommend either an unfaced bat. If you are going to use a faced bat, place it toward the exterior of the building.
And, you know, I don't know if you've seen it, Bobby, but a lot of times when I come and see bats, that's what I see is the paper facing me. And the insulators will, you know, argue, you know, with me, and, you know, the builder will argue with me that his insulators, you know what they're doing. They've been doing that for 30 years. That's the way they've always been doing it. But that doesn't mean it's done correctly. And we have, you know, I'm not saying that we have failed people. We try to educate people now. And every time I see that, I try to educate the insulators and the builders, and it's been a huge learning curve because I get fought all the time on it. And I'm sure, Bobby, you've seen that where they're just determined to do it the way they've always done it.
Yeah, it's always do what you always done, always get what you always got. And I hear that all the time. We've been building them for 50 years that way. And I just tell people, you know, wouldn't be bragging about that. But I actually have letters from just about every insulation manufacturer out there that that verifies that you really don't want that craft back paper facing the inside. Now, is it going to be a problem in every house? Obviously not. But if you do a really, really good job of putting it in, you get a really cold house in a hot, humid climate, it can cause problems. And we have seen a lot of it over the years.
Yeah, and since I've been educating some of the insulators, they have turned the bats the other way. So I'm starting to see better compliance once we've educated them. But I still come upon homes, and a lot of homes where, you know, when we walk in, that's what we see. So we always try to educate them. And like Bobby said, I mean, you know, probably may or may not have problems, but it's just not the way it should be done. So that's part of what we do at the visual examination too, is educate builders on and the insulators on the proper way for bats, which bats are probably used in about 50% of the homes that we do inspect. And windows and doors, I didn't put a lot of pictures here, but I think that was pretty obvious. Windows and doors should be caulked and sealed. Another thing that I just wanted to mention, and you know, I always, I go into a lot of attics, and it's not part of, you know, a requirement or anything like that, but I just thought I'd throw it out there that, you know, to get a solar board, I think they call it tech shield or solar board on your OSB in the attic, that can really cool your attic quite a bit here in this climate. And for the cost that you have to pay for that additional, that, you know, aluminum foil backing type of OSB, the cost would allow, that cost is not that much more. I've never priced it in each individual house myself, but to have that aluminum faced backing on that OSB in your attic would provide significant cooling capability to your attic, sometimes by 30 degrees more in the attic. And when I walk into an attic on a hot summer day, there is like a physical difference I feel in an attic that has this tech shield or solar board or whatever you want. There's various names for it depending on the company, but there is a significant cooling difference, and it's not that much more for this OSB with this aluminum backing. So this is something that I suggest, you know, and I think, Bobby, it's not a requirement, but I mean, it makes a significant difference on your rating. Isn't that correct? If you're doing a full rating,
yes,
to have the OSB.
Yeah, if you're doing a 45L or an Energy Star rating, it gives you a number of points there toward qualifying. I've done monitoring of these buildings side by side, one with a radiant barrier, one without, throughout an entire summer. And it's typically at the peak of the day about 30 degrees cooler in that attic. And construction people, they're workers who are working inside of these houses as they're building them. You know, all you have to do is ask any of them. They'll tell you a house with Tech Shield is a lot more pleasant to work in June, July, and August than a house without it.
Yeah, and it's just so much bang for your buck. So I just thought I'd throw that in there so that people know, because I still walk into some houses and I still see just a typical OSB, you know. So it's just something that we wanted to mention, you know. Now the cost, you know, between a blower door and a visual inspection. Visual inspection is like $200. It's about $100 per inspection. A blower door, I've seen it done for free. I can see it range from $300 to $500. I would say that if a blower door is really cheap, you may not be getting the best blower door thing. And I wanted to say on this call, we have Bobby Parks, who is a ResNet rater, who is on the higher bar level, a ResNet rater. And I don't know, Bobby, could you interject about like blower door, what should be the typical fees? And you know, I think you had saw where I discussed, you know, some of these guys who just get sort of the 1-day class and they do the blower door, but all they're doing is analyzing whether it meets the ACH. They're not really analyzing a house.
Yeah, the fees are all over the map. It just, you'll find different people charging different fees in different parts of the state. And like you said earlier, it's not really being enforced in probably 10% of the state, but there are areas that are requiring it. And they're basically, the numbers are, if you come in over 7 air changes per hour, the building is leaky, which means you have to tighten it up. If you come in below 3 air changes per hour, which is a considered a tight building, then you have to add mechanical ventilation to it. So that's one of the reasons why some people don't do the testing, because if they build a really good tight house, it comes in less than 3 air changes per hour, then they have to add additional ventilation, which is really nothing more than usually a 5-inch vent, a 5-inch fleck that goes from the return air, you know, to the eave of the house to where they can bring fresh air in when the air handler is running. Most people that I see, and most of the people that I've talked to around the state, inspection wise, are doing the visual inspection, but very few are actually doing the blower door. But, you know, one of the things I say in a lot of my classes, if you're not testing, you're guessing. So you can look at it, it may look good, but when you actually do the testing, you'll learn a lot about the building.
But the optimal thing would be, you know, to really do both, because you know, as the code increases in 2015, there is no option. You have to do both. So really, to get versed in both sides of it is really important if you're going to be a builder building to, you know, I mean, who knows? I mean, with the new administration, there may be some energy programs that are come out for builders, and any energy program for a home is going to require a visual and a blower door, no matter what. It's going to follow what the rest of the country follows, not what Louisiana follows, which is a lower bar, which is the 2009 IECC. So when you do, like when Bobby does the Energy Star or different things like that, they're going to require a visual and a blower door. So they kind of work hand in hand. Now we typically just do the visual inspection, and that's just sort of our niche that we stay in. We don't do the blower door. If I have to do a blower door, you know, we usually just have them call the HBA or something like that. Bobby's up in North Louisiana, so we can't get him down here all the time. So unless usually he comes down here when there's a problem and a forensic issue or something like that. And that's usually something that's a little bit way more costly than your typical blower door. But I don't see a lot of people getting trained to ResNet down here. I think that's a challenge that I think we're going to have, you know, is to get enough good ResNet raters around here. But there are some ResNet raters here and there, but you know, it's a fee that builders are not used to paying, and anything that they're not used to paying, they're probably going to get upset about, you know, because it's an added cost. But visual inspection can be done. Now, I think maybe visual inspections must be being done by some other code people, maybe in that parish or something like that. But of course, a visual inspection, it's only feasible for us to do visual inspections within our radii, within, you know, Baton Rouge, Ascension, and other areas. It wouldn't be feasible, obviously, for me to go or any, you know, a guy in our office to go up to Alexandria, you know. So any of these inspectors, whether it be blower door or visual, we should really try to get a better network of people and, you know, different parish areas so that they can take care of stuff within their radius. But that's usually what the fees are. And like I said, this is a requirement. This is not, even if your parish, and Bobby can tell you that even though your parish or your permit office may not require this, you are required to do this as a builder. Just like the IRS were to say, if you didn't pay your taxes, the IRS says you would know that you have to pay taxes. Just like this with the code, you are supposed to build houses to the code, and this is part of the code. Yes, Bobby had just put in the chat, if you see the chat box, if you do the visual, you're just making sure that you can pass a blower door test. It makes it easy for everything and stuff. So the visual definitely helps. It's not necessary, I mean, you know, in this code, but it does certainly help, you know. But and that's why in the 2009, when they developed this, they actually encouraged the visual first in the 2009 to sort of get baby steps, just to get builders used to knowing how to install and put it in. And then in the 2015 and the 2018 code, they added the blower door, which is the performance test, because they knew if they could get the builders used to the visual examination, that the blower door step was just one, or the performance with the blower door was just one step further that they could go in order to make an energy efficient home. And in the end, you know, it's all about making these homes operating costs lower, the home more comfortable, the energy bills for that person who has purchased the home will be lower. I mean, you could see energy bills that for houses that are done correctly, that are insulated right, you could see a $200 difference in energy bills every month. One guy could be paying $500 a month for his AC bill, and a guy who has a house that's insulated properly is paying $200 a month, not more than $200 a month, or even $100 a month if they're insulated correctly. And can you imagine saving $200, $300 a month for as long as you own that home? That's a lot of money. And so when you build correctly, you are doing a significant savings for that homeowner. I mistyped something here. Will be notified of medicines. I don't even know what that means, but I really did mess up the spelling on this slide, so I apologize. Blower door versus visual steps. I think, Bobby, you said below 7, but I thought you had to meet 5. Bobby, on the
actually, if you're 7 air changes per hour at CFM 50 or more, that's considered leaky, and the building has to be tightened up. Initially, the standard was that if you're below 5, then you have to add mechanical ventilation. But in 2015, that was amended down to 3 air changes per hour, because they felt like the window between 5 and 7 was too small, and it really, additional ventilation wasn't needed in a building until you got below 3. So it was initially 5, and then it was amended down to 3.
Well, you know, so as long as you meet between 5 and 7, you're good. If you're over 7, then you have failed. And so usually if you have a blower door company, or your AC provider is doing it, or whoever's doing your blower door, they would tell you if you're in compliant or not with your ACH levels. And then that's what you would do if you were doing a blower door. You just have them come in and do your blower door, and they would have to write a letter, and that letter would say whether or not you pass or fail the code, and that would be given to the builder or the permit office, however your permit office is working. And for the third party on the visual, you have to request on the day for us to view on the open wall. A lot of builders will call us a couple days ahead of time and say, look, I got the insulator scheduled for this Thursday, and we'll just put it on our calendar. And then we might text the builder and say, did the insulators, because sometimes the insulators get distracted or they couldn't get there that day. So we'll just make sure they're out there, because usually we don't want to waste a day going out there when the insulator couldn't get there that day. And sometimes these houses are a little farther out, and you don't want to drive out there and nothing's been done. And I apologize, that will be notified. What I meant was we'll be notified of issues at the house. So if there's any gaps or things that aren't sealed, we'll text the builder. I usually text the builder a picture, and then he'll get the guy to come back out there. If it's a small thing, for me personally, as long as they take a picture and text it to me, if it's a small thing, I'm good with it. If it was really, not sufficient and there was a lot of deficiencies throughout it, I'll say that I have to come back out and check it again a second time. So they'll call me when it's fixed and I'll go back out. Then when the attic is insulated, then you would contact us again, and that will be our second inspection, and we'll go out there and make sure that the attic is sufficient. Like I said, the main thing is, the main thing we're looking for is the attic doors and stuff, because those are usually where we see the non-compliance, where the attic doors are gasketed and sealed and has at least that R4 insulation. And then we'll create a letter that says it meets the standards, and we'll sign it, and we'll send that to the builder or the thing. Now, we have some builders that the parish or the permit office doesn't even require that, and we still do the visual inspection, and we give them a letter, and that builder puts it in their file. And that builder later on can prove, hey, I've done it to code compliance, I've had an inspection done, and they just file it. So like I indicated before, just because the permit office is not requesting it, for the builder's liability, he should have done one or the other, a blower door or visual inspection, in order to make sure that if something comes back on him, he has something to show that, look, we did do an inspection by a third party for this. And on the open wall and the visual, the most reasons why we can't do a visual is because he forgot to call us on the open wall. And that's like, most of the time. If he calls and said, look, I got pictures. Well, it doesn't matter if he has pictures or anything like that. We cannot give it an okay unless we've been physically there to see it and take pictures. Because what will happen is when we get audited and something happens, then we can lose our capability to be inspector. So we lose our license and our certification and everything if we're found out that we're just allowing builders to say that they were compliant. So it comes back on us. So it's not like we're trying to be ugly or anything like that, but it's our way of living. And if we lose our license, that's, very hurtful to our business. So we usually just try, to let them know, look, you always have the blower door. It's not the end of the world. You can do a blower door. We'll just catch you on the next house. We lose money at that, but we don't want to lose our way of living. So we definitely, tell the builder they can do a blower door, and it's not the end of the world. But if we can't be there at the open wall, no big deal, but we'll try to catch it. But if we're not there, then we cannot look at the wall before the drywall is put up. So I have my information here. And like I said, you could go to that LSU, Louisiana Code Council, to look for all the third-party verifiers. Bobby, is there a place where people can find blower door people?
Yes, if you go to the ResNet website and then look in under Louisiana, it shows all the certified people that have been certified through ResNet. Now, I'm not sure about the classes that they're doing at the LSU Ag House, the Louisiana House, LA House. I don't know how they're listing their folks, but I know there's been a lot of people that's went through there and got certified as well.
Yeah, and you may be able to call LSU, their program over there, and ask them how to find certified guys. But at least here, I've noticed, a lot of AC guys are certified. At least I see a lot of AC guys now. Whether or not they should be really doing the blower door is a whole nother question. But I do see that going on. I'm aware of it. I'm trying to think if there's any questions about the difference between a visual and a blower door. They're both good. They should work together, but you have the option here. You've seen sort of the pictures that we've looked at, tidbits about the OSB board and about the bad insulation, as far as the paper facing in or out, penetrations, the way, just what we're looking for. So is there any questions about what energy inspections are, and any? You can put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves if anybody just has a question and just wants to ask a question. Let me see. What's the time? About 9:30, so that's about where I wanted to end, to leave it up. Bobby, is there anything that you might want to see that, you know, I'm sure I had to put this together the last moment, so I don't, is there anything that maybe some key things that I'm trying to think that I could have forgotten?
No, I think you did a great job. I think one of the big things is, you know, kind of to follow up on your visual and the actual testing. You know, that's what I said in the chat there. The visual helps to ensure that you would pass the test in the event that you know, had to do one or was trying to get a rating, because it's a lot more cost effective to fix it on the front end, as I mean, to do it right the first time, than it is to have to go back and redo it. When you have to start tearing stuff out and resealing something because it failed the test, that gets really, really expensive. So it's a lot, it's well worth the value of having that visual inspection done ahead of time.
Bobby, when you do the blower door, do you find, where do you find most of the leaks are presenting themselves? You know, the that you find where the most problems are. You know, you come in, you do the blower door, where are you finding most of the problems?
Oddly enough, along the floor seal, the seal plate on the floor, a lot of people aren't using a seal. They're using either like a liquid nail or liquid caulk or something, trying to create a seal between that bottom plate and the concrete. And that has become one of the most problematic places that we see, is along the bottom plate. And then secondary to that, I think, is probably your electrical penetrations through your top plate. You had some great pictures there of the electrical penetrations where they had been sealed up. And a lot of times you'll see people run through and they'll drill 2 or 3 holes, and then they'll only use one of them to run a wire through, and then that leaves 2 more open holes right there. And that creates a path. It creates a path from the attic through the top plate down into the wall cavity, and then we have penetrations into sheetrock where your light switches or your receptacles are. So there's a pathway there. So when we start pulling that blower door, and if you look at the wall with an infrared camera, you can literally trace every one of those holes in that top plate. Then you walk over there and you put your hand over that light switch, and you can just feel the air blowing through. And then when we get up there and we look, sure enough, there'll be 2 or 3 or 4 holes where they thought they were going to run multiple wires, and then they only ran one, and then you've got every one of them just wide open to the outside. So your bottom, your floor plates and your electrical penetrations, or the holes that they drill in the top plate, are usually the 2 biggest areas that become problematic.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby. And I have one question from April Guillory. Do you travel to Lafayette? I mean, I think Bobby travels everywhere. I mean, depending, I mean, he can always talk about whether he travels for blower door, or he may be able to find you someone in Lafayette. But we will travel to Lafayette sometimes, depending on the volume of work. But if it's just for one house, probably not so much so. Usually we travel to Lafayette if it's, say, multifamily, for me, at least for our company, if it's multifamily. But I think Bobby or I probably could find, you know, some people in Lafayette, if depending on what you need. But I can, April, I can certainly get you that information, you know, on who could do it in Lafayette if it's not multifamily. And Bobby, do you travel all over the state? I mean, whether it's for one home or what, or do you just, if it's more forensic stuff, or?
Yeah, the majority of what I do is either forensics or the Energy Star certifications. And for the Energy Star, I do go over multiple states, actually, for both.
And yeah, Energy Star is something good for a lot of builders to look into. But that's one of the things too that I think Bobby and I both have trouble with, is in other areas where it's just, you know, a home here and there, when a builder needs to have a blower door test done or a visual, sometimes it's difficult for us to find somebody in the area. But I can try to track down any area. But April, I'll get you maybe some potential names in the Lafayette area, third parties that can help you out in that case. And Hayward Connolly has a question on the exterior wall. Are horizontal stud penetrations required to be steeled? For example, wire running from one outlet to another. On an exterior wall. I'm not exactly sure, Hayward.
No, I think that's going from wall cavity to wall cavity is what they're because he said on a horizontal
stud penetration.
Yes. Now, a vertical stud penetration would not need to be sealed, but your horizontal studs are typically would be your top plate, and all top plate penetrations have to be sealed.
Okay. Yes. Okay. That's okay. So, yes, that they would have to be. And from Greg Israel, and Greg says, I test across the state, and he is based in Baton Rouge. They can go any place that he's needed, and that's Greg Israel, who he's in the chat box there. So I'm sure that Greg can get a hold of anybody, and I think he's a member of the HBA. And then we, of course, contact your local HBAs as well, in your area. Usually, that's always sort of a good start. And I think Greg does a blower door test and stuff, I believe. If Greg could, I think he does the blower door test. And if there's any other questions, if there's no other questions, now I do want to put a disclaimer, like for the CEUs. Yeah. So email Mackenzie will have the. I'm gonna put it. Okay, we're about to put in the chat box for the CEUs. You can email Mackenzie. And I think we're going to put Mackenzie's email in there for you to get your 2 hours of CEUs on this. Or Danielle. So we're in the chat box right now. We're putting in the email so that you can get your CEUs sent to you for your education. And it should be in the chat box. And of course, you always can call the Greater Baton Rouge HBA, and then they can get that information to you if you don't get the emails off the chat box. And once again, we're recording this, so of course we'll have this recorded. Greg put his Greg also put his email address in the chat box as well. And we're monitoring the chat box. Okay, we see the email addresses in the chat box here. And of course, anybody can contact us if you need anything. And if you have my email, if you have a question, email me. And if you're looking for visual or blower door inspectors in your area, just contact us, and then we'll be able to get you one, in your area, and get someone to travel and get you one. But any other questions about some of the slides or a specific question, feel free to email the HBA or me, and then we'll definitely get back to you. I appreciate y'all taking your morning right before Christmas to log in and get your CEUs and to learn a little bit more about energy inspections. Hopefully next year we'll have a few more of these classes and maybe in person, which would be nice. And I'll probably have a better slideshow. I can put it together a little bit, a more integrated slideshow to show a little bit more stuff than what we've shown here. But I appreciate everybody for joining, and I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and we're looking forward to a much better 2021. So thank you, everybody.